Clara Whitmore pressed her face against the cold iron bars of the storage room behind the saloon, her fingers bleeding from trying to pry the lock open. 21 years old, and her own mother had signed the paper that sold her. $20. That was her price. But what Clara didn't know was that a stranger had just walked into that saloon, a widowed rancher with 3 children and a heart full of grief, and he was about to change everything. This is her story. If you want to follow Clara's journey to the end, subscribe to our channel and comment the city you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. The summer of 1878 had no mercy. Clara Whitmore sat on the floor of the storage room, her back against grain sacks that smelled of mold and whiskey. Her wrists were raw from the rope Vernon Shaw had tied around them that morning. 3 days. She'd been locked in this room for 3 days. The door scraped open. Light cut through the darkness like a blade. Vernon Shaw stood there, his belly straining against his vest, his smile showing teeth yellow as old corn. "You ready to work yet, girl?" Clara didn't answer. He stepped closer. "Your mama signed the paper fair and square. $20 covers your stepfather's debts. You belong to me now, legal-like." "I ain't a horse," Clara said. "No, you ain't." Vernon crouched down to her level, his breath hot with tobacco. "A horse I'd treat better. A horse earns its keep first day." Clara met his eyes. "Then sell me to someone who'll get their money's worth." Vernon laughed. "Oh, I will. Just not the way you're thinking." He grabbed her arm and hauled her to her feet. Clara stumbled, legs weak from hunger. Vernon dragged her through the back hall into the main room of the saloon. Noon sun poured through dirty windows. A dozen men sat at tables, cards, and drinks, forgotten, all watching her. "Gentlemen," Vernon announced, "this here's Clara. She'll be working the floor starting tonight." A man in the corner whistled low. Clara's stomach dropped. She knew what working the floor meant in a place like this. "Unless," Vernon continued, "one of you wants to buy out her debt. $20 plus 3 days room and board. Let's call it 25 even." Silence. Vernon pushed Clara forward. "Come on now. Young Healthy can read and write. Her daddy was a school teacher before he died. She's educated." A rancher near the window shook his head. "Don't need no educated woman. Need one who can cook." "She can learn," Vernon said. Another man laughed. "For $25 I can find a wife in the catalog who already knows how." Clara stood in the middle of that room, feeling smaller than she'd ever felt in her life. These men looked at her like she was livestock at auction. Worse. At least livestock had value. The saloon doors swung open. A tall man stepped through, broad shoulders, dark hair, touched with early gray, a scar running along his jaw. He wore dust on his boots and weariness in his eyes. He moved to the bar without looking at anyone. "Whiskey," he said. His voice was low, tired. Vernon poured. "Ain't seen you in town before, mister." "Passing through." The man drank, set down the glass. "Looking for supplies, feed for horses." "Miller's got a store down the street." Vernon refilled the glass. "You a rancher?" "I am." Vernon's eyes lit up. "Then maybe you're in the market for help. Got a girl here." The man glanced at Clara for the first time. His eyes were brown, deep-set, hard to read. Clara lifted her chin. She wouldn't look away. If she was going to be sold again, she'd at least make whoever bought her see her as human first. "What's her story?" the man asked. "Stepfather owed me money. Mother signed her over to cover the debt." The man's jaw tightened. "Her mother sold her legal and proper." The rancher looked at Clara again. This time something shifted in his expression. Not pity, she'd have hated pity. Something else. Recognition, maybe. Like he'd seen loss before and knew its shape. "How much?" he asked. Vernon grinned. $25 takes her off my hands. She's young, healthy." "I heard you the first time." The man reached into his coat and pulled out a leather pouch. He counted bills onto the bar. 25. Vernon snatched the money, already counting. "She's all yours, mister. Good investment, I'd say." The rancher turned to Clara. "What's your name?" "Clara Whitmore." "Miss Whitmore." He tipped his hat. "I'm Samuel Callahan. I've got a ranch about 8 miles north. You'll have your own room. Door locks from the inside." Clara stared at him. Why what? Why'd you pay for me?" Samuel Callahan held her gaze. "Because nobody should be sold like that. And if I walked out that door without you, somebody worse would have bought you by sundown." Clara felt something crack inside her chest. Not hope she'd buried hope 3 days ago. Something raw. Confusion, maybe. Or the beginning of trust she wasn't ready to give. "I ain't agreeing to anything," she said. "You bought a debt, not a wife." "I know. I can leave whenever I want. Soon as you've got somewhere safe to go." Vernon laughed from behind the bar. "Good luck with that one, mister. She's got a mouth on her." Samuel didn't look at him. "Miss Whitmore, my wagon's outside. We can leave now or you can stay here. Your choice." Clara looked at the saloon, at the men still watching, at Vernon already pocketing the $25. She looked at Samuel Callahan, this stranger, who spoke to her like she was a person instead of property. "I'll get my things," she said. "You got things, a book, and my father's pocket watch. Shaw took 'em when they brought me in." Samuel turned to Vernon. "Give her back her belongings." Vernon's smile faded. "Now hold on." Samuel stepped closer to the bar. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. "The 25 covers her debt, not her property. Get her things, or we'll have a problem." Vernon's eyes flickered to Samuel's belt, where a pistol hung low and worn with use. He muttered something under his breath, then disappeared into the back room. Clara waited, heart-hammering. When Vernon returned, he dropped a battered book and a tarnished silver watch onto the bar. "There. Happy?" Clara grabbed them before he could change his mind. The watch was warm in her palm, her father's last gift before the fever took him. "Thank you," she whispered. Not to Vernon, to Samuel. Samuel nodded once. "Let's go." The wagon sat in the street, hitched to 2 sturdy horses. Samuel helped Clara up onto the seat, his grip firm, but careful, like he was handling something that might break. She wasn't going to break. She'd already been broken 3 days ago when her mother signed that paper, without looking at her face. "My mother," Clara said as Samuel climbed up beside her. She didn't even cry. Samuel gathered the reins. Some people can't see worth in others, 'cause they never found it in themselves. Clara turned to look at him. "That's a strange thing for a rancher to say." "I wasn't always a rancher." He clicked his tongue, and the horses started forward. "Before the war I taught school, 2 years in a 1-room building in Ohio." "You were a teacher." "Till the war came. After that." He shrugged. "Man changes." They rode in silence for a while. The town fell away behind them, nothing but open prairie ahead, the sky so wide it made Clara feel dizzy. "You said you've got a ranch," she said. "I do." "You live alone?" "No, ma'am. Got 3 children." Clara turned sharply. "Children?" "2 boys and a girl. Jake's 14, he'll give you trouble. Ben's 10, curious as a cat, and Lily's 7. "Where's their mother?" Samuel's hands tightened on the reins. "Fever took her 3 years ago. Took my daughter, too. The same week." Clara didn't say she was sorry. Words like that never helped. Instead, she said, "Lily, she yours by blood. My wife's niece. Her parents died in the same fever outbreak. Sarah and I took her in when she was 4. When Sarah passed..." He paused. Lily stopped talking. "Stop talking." 3 years now. Doc says nothing's wrong with her body. It's in her mind. The grief, I reckon. Clara thought of her own grief burying her father at 17, watching her mother marry a man who gambled away everything they had being sold like furniture, when the debts came due. "Grief does strange things," she said quietly. Samuel glanced at her. "You've seen your share." It wasn't a question. The ranch came into view as the sun tilted west, painting the sky in shades of copper and rose. A clapboard house sat on a low-rise, surrounded by corrals and a weathered barn. Horses grazed in the pasture beyond. Closer in, Clara spotted a vegetable garden gone half to weeds and laundry hanging crooked on a line. "It ain't much," Samuel said. "It's more than I had this morning." He pulled the wagon to a stop near the porch. The front door banged open and a boy came out, tall, dark-haired, his father's jaw already forming. "Pa." The boy stopped short when he saw Clara. "Who's she?" "Jake. This is Miss Clara Whitmore. She's going to help around the house." Jake's eyes went cold. "We don't need help." "We do, and you know it. Where's Ben and Lily?" "Ben's in the barn. Lily's inside." Samuel climbed down from the wagon. "Go tell your brother to come meet Miss Whitmore." Jake didn't move. "Pa, you can't just bring some stranger." "Jacob." Samuel's voice dropped low. "Do as I say." Jake shot Clara a look full of suspicion, then turned and stalked toward the barn. Clara climbed down without waiting for help. "He doesn't want me here." "He doesn't want anyone here," Samuel said. "Been that way since his mother died. He remembers her most." "I won't pretend to be her." "Good. Nobody's asking you to." They stood there in the fading light, two strangers bound by circumstance. Clara clutched her father's watch in one hand and the worn book in the other. "What's the book?" Samuel asked. She held it up. "Poetry. My father's." "You read poetry?" "Every day of my life." Something shifted in his expression, respect maybe. "My wife used to read to the children every night. Since she passed, the house has been quiet." "I can read to them, if they'd let me." Samuel nodded slowly. "We'll see." The barn door opened and a younger boy came running across the yard. Ben, 10 years old, with a mess of brown hair and eager eyes. "Pa, Jake said you brought a lady home?" "I did. Miss Whitmore, this is Benjamin." Ben skidded to a stop in front of Clara, looking her up and down. "Are you gonna be our new ma?" Clara blinked. "No, I'm here to help, that's all." "Oh." Ben's face fell, then brightened. "Can you cook?" "Some." "Better than Jake." "I hope so." Ben grinned. "Good. Jake burns everything." Samuel put a hand on Ben's shoulder. "Where's Lily?" "Inside. She won't come out." Clara looked toward the house. Through the window, she caught a glimpse of a small face, pale framed by dark hair, watching her. Then the face disappeared. "She's scared," Clara said. "She's always scared," Samuel replied. "Of everything since her aunt died." Clara thought about that, a 7-year-old girl who'd lost everyone she loved, trapped inside her own silence. She knew what that felt like. Different shape, same weight. "I'll give her time," Clara said. "And space." Samuel nodded. "That's wise." Jake returned from the barn, his expression still guarded. He stood apart from the others, arms crossed. "Jake, show Miss Whitmore to the spare room," Samuel said. "The one off the hall." That was Ma's sewing room. "It's a bedroom now." Jake's jaw tightened. "You're putting her in Ma's room. I'm putting her in a room that has a bed and a door that locks. Go." For a moment, Clara thought Jake might refuse. But something in his father's tone cut through his resistance. He turned and walked toward the house without looking back. Clara followed. The house smelled of dust and stale bread. Clara noticed unwashed dishes stacked in the kitchen, a pile of mending overflowing from a basket, and children's clothes scattered across the floor. 3 years without a woman's hand. It showed. Jake led her down a narrow hall to a door at the end. He pushed it open and stood aside. The room was small, a bed, a washstand, a chair by the window. On the wall hung a sampler with crooked stitching, "Home is where love lives." Clara stepped inside. "Lock's on the inside," Jake said. "Like Pa said." "Thank you." Jake didn't leave. He stood in the doorway watching her. "What?" Clara asked. "My ma was a good woman," he said. "Best woman I ever knew, and no one is gonna replace her in this house. You understand?" Clara set her book and her father's watch on the nightstand. "I understand better than you think." "How's that?" "Because I lost someone too. And I know there's no replacing them. Not ever." Jake studied her for a long moment. Something flickered in his eyes, not acceptance, but maybe the first crack in his armor. "Supper's at sundown," he said. "Don't be late." He left, pulling the door shut behind him. Clara stood alone in the small room. The silence pressed in. Through the window she could see the prairie stretching out forever golden in the late light. 24 hours ago she'd been locked in Vernon Shaw's storage room planning her escape. Now she was here in a stranger's house, surrounded by children who didn't want her carrying nothing but a dead man's watch and a book of poems. She sat on the edge of the bed and let herself breathe for the first time in 3 days. A soft sound made her turn. The door had cracked open again. In the gap, a small face appeared. Lily watching her with wide, dark eyes. Clara didn't move, didn't speak, just waited. Lily stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly she pushed the door open a few inches more. In her hands she held a rag doll, worn and faded. Clara smiled gently. "That's a pretty doll." Lily didn't answer. But she didn't run either. They stayed like that, the woman and the silent child, as the sun sank lower and the sky turned to amber and rose. It wasn't trust, not yet. But it was a beginning. And in this house full of grief and guarded hearts, a beginning was more than Clara had dared to hope for. Supper was beans biscuits that crumbled like chalk and awkward silence. Clara sat at one end of the long table. Samuel sat at the other. Between them, Jake glared at his plate, Ben fidgeted, and Lily kept her head down, not eating. "The biscuits ain't great," Ben offered. "Jake made 'em." "I didn't see you helping," Jake shot back. "I was feeding the horses." "You were hiding from chores." "Boys," Samuel's voice cut through. "That's enough." Silence fell again. Clara picked up a biscuit and took a bite, dry as sand, but she swallowed it without complaint. "Tomorrow," she said, "I'll make the biscuits." Jake looked up. "You saying my biscuits ain't good enough?" "I'm saying mine might be better." She met his eyes. "Unless you want to keep cooking." Jake's fork scraped against his plate. "Fine. You cook." "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just don't make 'em worse." Ben grinned. "Can you make pie Ma used to make pie?" "What kind?" "Apple, with sugar on top." Clara nodded. "I can try." For the first time, Ben looked at her with something other than curiosity, something like hope. After supper, Samuel took the boys out to check on a lame horse. Clara stood at the kitchen basin washing dishes, the water tepid and gray. A small hand tugged at her skirt. She looked down. Lily stood there. The rag doll clutched tight, her eyes fixed on Clara's face. "Hey there," Clara said softly. Lily didn't speak, but she reached up and set the rag doll on the edge of the basin. Clara understood. The child wanted the doll washed. "May I?" Clara asked. Lily nodded. Carefully, Clara dipped the doll in the water, gently scrubbing away months of grime. She wrung it out and set it on a cloth to dry. Lily watched every movement. "She's clean now," Clara said. "She just needs to dry." Lily reached for the doll, hesitated, then looked at Clara. "Go on," Clara said. "She's yours." Lily picked up the damp doll and held it close. For one fleeting moment her lips moved. No sound came out, but Clara saw the shape of a word forming. "Thank you." Then Lily turned and ran from the kitchen, her bare feet pattering on the wooden floor. Clara stood there, hands still wet, heart pounding. The child had tried to speak. 3 years of silence, and she'd tried. Clara didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Didn't know if Jake would ever accept her, or if Samuel would always see her as a debt he'd paid. But she knew that small moment, Lily's lips shaping silent words, meant something. It meant she wasn't worthless. It meant she could matter here in this house full of broken people. And for now, that was enough. The rooster crowed before dawn, and Clara was already awake. She hadn't slept much. Every creak of the old house made her flinch. Every shadow through the window reminded her of Vernon Shaw's storage room. But morning came anyway, indifferent to her fears. She dressed quickly, pinned her hair back, and stepped into the kitchen before anyone else stirred. The stove was cold. The larder was nearly bare, some flour salt pork, a few withered potatoes. Clara rolled up her sleeves and got to work. By the time Samuel came downstairs, the smell of fresh biscuits filled the house. He stopped in the doorway. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep." He nodded like he understood. "Smells good." "Better than Jake's, I hope." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "That ain't hard." Clara set a plate on the table. "Coffee's ready too." Samuel sat down watching her move through the kitchen like she'd been there for years instead of hours. "You didn't have to do this." "I know." She poured his coffee. "But I wanted to." "Why?" Clara paused. "Because for 3 days I couldn't do anything. Couldn't move, couldn't fight, couldn't even feed myself. This morning I can. So I will." Samuel held her gaze. Something passed between them. Not romance, not yet, but recognition. Two people who'd learned to survive by staying busy. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Don't thank me yet. You haven't tasted the biscuits." He took a bite, chewed. His eyebrows rose. "Well?" Clara asked. "These are good. Just good. Real good." He took another bite. "Best I've had since—" He stopped. The sentence hung unfinished. Clara understood. "Since your wife." "Yeah." She sat down across from him. "Tell me about her." Samuel set down his fork. "Why? Because I'm living in her house, cooking in her kitchen. I should know who she was." For a long moment he didn't answer. Then he said, "Her name was Sarah. She was stubborn as a mule and twice as hard-working. She could birth a calf, bake a pie, and quote scripture all in the same afternoon." "Sounds like a good woman." "She was." His voice roughened. "Too good for me, probably." "How'd she die?" "Fever. Came through the valley 3 years back. Took her and our daughter Emily in the same week. Lily's parents died the week after." Clara let the silence settle. Then she said, "I'm sorry. Everybody's sorry. Don't change nothing." "No, it don't." Footsteps on the stairs broke the moment. Ben appeared, hair-wild, eyes still heavy with sleep. "Something smells good. Miss Whitmore made biscuits," Samuel said. Ben grabbed one before Clara could stop him, stuffing half of it in his mouth. His eyes went wide. "These are amazing." "Don't talk with your mouth full," Clara said. Ben swallowed. "Sorry, ma'am, but they're really good." Jake came down next, moving slow, his expression already guarded. He looked at the biscuits, then at Clara. "You cooked." "I said I would." He sat down without a word and took a biscuit. He chewed slowly, deliberately, like he was searching for something to criticize. Clara waited. Jake swallowed. "They're all right." "High praise," Clara said dryly. Ben laughed. Jake shot him a look, but the corner of his mouth twitched. Progress. Lily appeared last, hovering in the doorway, the rag doll clutched to her chest. She looked at Clara with those wide, watchful eyes. "Good morning, Lily," Clara said softly. "You hungry?" Lily didn't answer, but she crept to the table and sat down in the chair closest to Clara. Samuel noticed. His eyes flickered with something surprise, maybe, or hope. Clara set a biscuit on Lily's plate. "There you go." Lily picked it up and took a small bite. She didn't smile, but she didn't run either. It was enough. After breakfast, Samuel pushed back from the table. "Boys, you've got chores. Jake, the fence on the north pasture needs mending. Ben, feed the chickens and check for eggs." "What about me?" Clara asked. "You've done enough already." "I ain't here to sit idle, Mr. Callahan." "Samuel." Clara paused. "What? Call me Samuel. Mr. Callahan was my father." She nodded slowly. "All right, Samuel. What can I do?" He glanced around the kitchen, the pile of mending, the dusty shelves, the chaos that 3 years without a woman had created. "Whatever you see fit," he said. "This house needs more help than I know how to ask for." Clara looked at the mess. At the children watching her. At this broken family trying to hold itself together. "Then I'll start at the beginning," she said. Samuel tipped his hat and headed for the door. Jake followed without a word. Ben paused long enough to grin at Clara. "I like you," he said. "Don't tell Jake I said that. Your secret's safe." Ben ran out, leaving Clara alone with Lily. The little girl sat at the table, still holding her biscuit, watching Clara with those silent, knowing eyes. "You want to help me?" Clara asked. Lily tilted her head. "I'm going to clean up. You can hand me things if you want." Lily didn't respond. But when Clara moved to the basin, the child slid off her chair and followed. For the next hour they worked side by side. Clara washed. Lily dried carefully, slowly, her small hands gripping each dish like it might break. Clara didn't push her to talk, didn't ask questions, just let the silence between them grow comfortable instead of heavy. When they finished, Clara knelt down to Lily's level. "Thank you for helping," she said. Lily's lips moved. No sound came out, but Clara saw the shape of the word. "Welcome." Clara's heart squeezed tight. "You're a good helper, Lily. Best I've ever had." Something flickered in Lily's eyes, not a smile but close. She clutched her doll tighter and ran out of the kitchen, bare feet pattering on the floor. Clara stood alone, hands still damp, feeling like she'd just witnessed something sacred. 2 weeks. That's how long it took for the Callahan ranch to start feeling different. Clara fell into a rhythm, up before dawn, breakfast on the table, dishes washed, mending, done, supper cooked. She learned which floorboards creaked, which window stuck, which cup was Jake's favorite, even though he'd never admit it. Ben followed her everywhere, full of questions. "Why do you roll the dough that way? What's that book you're always reading? Did you really have a father who was a teacher?" Clara answered every one. Ben's curiosity reminded her of herself at that age, hungry to know, desperate to understand. Jake kept his distance, but she caught him watching sometimes. Watching her cook. Watching her read to Ben. Watching her sit with Lily on the porch, patient and quiet. He never said anything, but he stopped leaving the room when she entered. Samuel worked from dawn to dark, coming home exhausted, hands calloused, face weathered by sun and wind. But he always paused at the door now, inhaling the smell of whatever Clara had made. "Smells like home," he said one evening. Clara looked up from the stove. "Chicken and dumplings. My father's recipe." "Your father cooked." "After my mother died, he had to. Said a man who couldn't feed himself was only half a man." Samuel sat down at the table, watching her work. "He sounds like a good man." "He was." Clara's voice caught. "Best man I ever knew." "What happened to him?" "Fever. Same as your wife probably. Came through Missouri when I was 17. Took him in 3 days." "And your mother?" Clara's hands stilled on the ladle. "She died when I was 12. Childbed fever with a baby that didn't live." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. She wasn't a kind woman. Not like your Sarah." Clara resumed stirring. "After she died, my father and I had 4 good years. Just the 2 of us. Those were the happiest years of my life." Samuel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, And after he died, my aunt took me in. A year later, she remarried to a man named Horace Whitmore. Your stepfather. In name only. He was a drunk and a gambler. Lost everything my aunt had. When she died of consumption, he sold me to Vernon Shaw to cover his debts. Samuel's jaw tightened. Where is he now? Horace dead, I hope, though I reckon hell's too good for him. And Shaw. Clara stopped stirring. Back in town, still running that saloon, still looking at me like I'm property that got away. He won't touch you, Samuel said. His voice had gone low hard. Not while you're under my roof. Clara turned to look at him. That's a big promise. It ain't a promise. It's a fact. Their eyes met. Something crackled between them. Tension, trust, the beginning of something neither was ready to name. The door banged open. Jake stomped in, covered in dust and sweat. Pa, the bay mare's throwing a shoe. I can't get her to hold still. Samuel stood. I'll handle it. He paused at the door, looking back at Clara. Supper can wait. It'll keep. He nodded and followed Jake out. Clara stood alone in the kitchen, heart still pounding from that look, that promise, that moment of connection. She didn't know what was happening between her and Samuel Callahan. But whatever it was, it scared her more than Vernon Shaw ever had. Sunday came, and with it a trip to town. Clara didn't want to go, but the flour was low, and Samuel needed supplies, and she refused to hide like a coward. You don't have to come, Samuel said as he hitched the wagon. Yes, I do. Clara climbed up onto the seat. I ain't going to spend my life scared of that man. Samuel looked at her for a long moment. You've got grit, Miss Whitmore. Clara. He paused. What? You call me Miss Whitmore like I'm some schoolteacher. My name's Clara. A slow smile crossed his face. All right, Clara. Ben scrambled into the wagon bed. Jake mounted his own horse, refusing to ride with the others. Lily stayed home with the neighbor's wife, Mrs. Patterson, a kind woman who'd agreed to watch her for the day. The ride to town took an hour. Clara spent it watching the prairie roll by, trying to calm the knot in her stomach. Copper Creek wasn't much a main street with a general store, a bank, a church, and Shaw's saloon at the far end. But it was the center of the world for 50 miles in every direction. When the wagon stopped in front of the general store, Clara felt eyes on her immediately. Whispers started before she even climbed down. That's her. The one Shaw was selling. Heard Callahan paid $25. For that seems steep. Clara's face burned, but she lifted her chin and walked into the store like she owned it. The shopkeeper, a thin man named Miller, looked up from behind the counter. His eyes went wide. Miss, he fumbled. Can I help you? Flour, sugar, and salt, Clara said. And whatever else is on Mr. Callahan's account. Miller's eyes darted to the door where Samuel had just entered. Mr. Callahan, I didn't know you were, that is, I wasn't expecting. Just fill the order, Samuel said. Miller nodded quickly and disappeared into the back. Clara moved to the fabric display, running her fingers over a bolt of blue calico. She could feel the other customers staring, two women by the canned goods, whispering behind their hands. She ignored them. That's a good color for you. Clara turned. A woman stood beside her, middle-aged, well-dressed, with sharp eyes and a sharper smile. I'm Abigail Crawford, the woman said. My husband owns the bank. Clara Whitmore. I know who you are. Abigail's smile didn't waver. The whole town knows. Clara's spine stiffened. Is that so? Don't get defensive, dear. I'm not judging. Abigail lowered her voice. Truth is, Vernon Shaw's been a blight on this town for years. Any woman who got away from him deserves a medal, not a scandal. Clara blinked. You don't think I'm... What a harlot! Abigail laughed. Honey, I've seen how Shaw treats his girls. You surviving 3 days in that back room and still standing upright tells me everything I need to know about your character. Clara felt something loosen in her chest. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Half the women in this town will snub you. The other half will come around eventually. Abigail patted her arm. Give it time. And if you need anything at all, you come find me. She swept out of the store, leaving Clara staring after her. Samuel appeared at her elbow. You all right? Yeah. Clara shook her head, still processing. Yeah, I think I am. They loaded the supplies and headed for the wagon. Clara was halfway across the street when a voice stopped her cold. Well, well, if it ain't my runaway investment. Clara turned. Vernon Shaw stood on the boardwalk outside his saloon, arms crossed, that yellow smile splitting his face. Don't look so scared, girl. I ain't gonna bite. He stepped down into the street, moving closer. Just wanted to see how you're settling in. Heard Callahan's got you playing house out at his ranch. Samuel moved between them. Walk away, Shaw. Easy now. I'm just being neighborly. You don't know the meaning of the word. Shaw's smile hardened. I know the meaning of a lot of words, Callahan. Like debt, like interest, like what's owed. I paid what you asked. You paid what I asked that day. Shaw's eyes slid to Clara. But a good businessman knows to renegotiate when the terms change. Clara's blood went cold. What's that supposed to mean? Shaw laughed. Means I've been thinking is all. $25 for a girl who can read, write, cook, and clean. Seems low now, real low. Samuel's hand dropped to his belt. You got your money. Deal's done. Maybe, maybe not. Shaw tipped his hat. We'll see how things shake out. Nice seeing you, Clara. Real nice. He turned and walked back into the saloon, the swinging doors closing behind him. Clara realized she was shaking. Samuel put a hand on her arm. He's bluffing. Is he? He has to be. The deal was legal. He can't. He can do whatever he wants, Clara cut in. Men like him always can. They stood there in the middle of the street, the summer sun beating down, the threat hanging in the air like smoke. Let's go home, Clara said quietly. Samuel nodded, but his jaw was set and his hand stayed near his pistol the whole ride back. That night Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Shaw's words echoing in her head. We'll see how things shake out. What did that mean? Was he going to try to take her back? Claim she still owed him something? Or was it worse than that? A soft knock at her door made her sit up. Who is it? It's Jake. Clara frowned. Jake. At this hour, she wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and opened the door. Jake stood in the hallway, a candle in his hand, his face unreadable. Can I come in? It's late. I know, but I need to talk to you. Clara hesitated, then stepped aside. Jake entered and set the candle on the nightstand. He stood there for a moment, not looking at her. I heard what Shaw said today, he finally said. I was on my horse, but I heard. You were listening. Hard not to. Jake turned to face her. He's dangerous. I know. Do you... Jake's voice sharpened. Because you're acting like you can just ignore him and he'll go away. Men like Shaw don't go away. They take what they want, and they don't care who gets hurt. Clara's eyes narrowed. You think I don't know that I spent 3 days locked in his back room? I know exactly what kind of man he is. Then why ain't you scared? I am scared. Clara's voice broke. I'm terrified, but I won't let him see it. I won't give him that power. Jake stared at her. Something shifted in his expression, the hardness cracking just a little. My ma was like that, he said quietly. Scared of nothing, or at least she never let us see. She sounds brave. She was. Jake swallowed. I miss her every day. Clara reached out and touched his arm. I know. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then Jake pulled back the walls, going up again. I just came to say be careful. Shaw ain't finished with you. I know. And if he tries anything. Jake hesitated. I'll be there. Clara's heart squeezed. Thank you, Jake. He nodded once, grabbed his candle, and left without another word. Clara stood in the doorway watching him go. That boy was more like his father than he knew, guarded, wounded, but with a core of iron underneath. She was starting to care about him, about all of them, and that terrified her more than Vernon Shaw ever could. 3 weeks after Clara arrived, the first miracle happened. It was a Tuesday evening. Clara was sitting on the porch, reading aloud from her father's book of poetry. Ben sat beside her, following along. Jake leaned against the railing, pretending not to listen. Samuel smoked his pipe in the rocking chair, eyes half closed. And Lily sat on the step below Clara, her rag doll in her lap, her face tilted up toward the words. Clara finished a poem about spring flowers and turned the page. This one's my favorite, she said. My father used to read it to me when I was your age, Lily. She began to read, Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words, and never stops at all. When she finished, the porch was quiet. Then, soft as a whisper, a voice said, More. Everyone froze. Clara looked down. Lily was staring at her eyes, huge lips parted. What did you say? Clara whispered. More. Lily's voice was rusty, unused, barely audible. Please. Ben's jaw dropped. She talked. Hush, Samuel said, but his voice was thick. He set down his pipe, hands trembling. Clara's eyes filled with tears. You want more poetry, Lily? Lily nodded. Clara turned the page, her hands shaking so badly she could barely read. But she found her voice, and she kept reading poem after poem until the stars came out and Lily fell asleep against her shoulder. When Clara finally looked up, she saw Samuel watching her. There were tears on his face. 3 years, he said hoarsely. 3 years, and she never said a word. Not to me, not to the boys, not to the doc. She just needed time, Clara whispered. No. Samuel stood crossing to where she sat. He knelt down beside her so close she could feel the warmth of him. She needed you. Clara didn't know what to say, didn't know what to do. So she just sat there holding a sleeping child while a broken man looked at her like she'd just given him back something he thought was lost forever. The weeks that followed were the happiest Clara had known since her father died. Lily didn't talk much, a word here, a phrase there, but every syllable was a victory. Clara read to her every night, and slowly, carefully, the child's silence began to thaw. Ben attached himself to Clara like a shadow, helping her cook, asking endless questions, begging for stories. Even Jake softened. He started eating supper with the family instead of taking his plate to the barn. He helped Clara carry water from the well. Once, when she struggled to lift a heavy pot, he took it from her without a word. And Samuel looked at her differently now. Longer glances, softer words, his hand brushing hers when he passed the salt. Clara felt it too, the pull between them growing stronger every day. But she didn't act on it. Couldn't. Not yet. She was still a woman who'd been sold. He was still a man mourning his wife. Some things needed time. 1 month after Clara arrived, everything changed. It was a Saturday afternoon. Samuel had gone to town for supplies. The boys were in the pasture. Clara was in the kitchen with Lily, teaching her to knead dough. A horse's hooves pounded up the road. Clara wiped her hands and went to the window. A rider was coming fast, urgent. Not Samuel, someone else. Her blood went cold when she recognized the horse, Vernon Shaw's horse. Lily, Clara said, her voice steady despite her hammering heart. Go to your room and lock the door. Don't come out until I say. Lily's eyes went wide, but she obeyed, running down the hall. Clara grabbed the rifle from above the fireplace and stepped onto the porch. Shaw reined up in the yard, that yellow smile spreading across his face. Well now, Ain't this cozy? Get off my property, Clara said. Your property? Shaw laughed. Last I checked, this belongs to Callahan, and you belong to me. You got your money. I got $25. But here's the thing, darlin'. Shaw dismounted, moving closer. I've been doing some thinking, some calculating. A woman who can run a house, raise children, warm a bed, that's worth a lot more than 25. Clara raised the rifle. One more step and I shoot. Shaw stopped, but he didn't look scared. He looked amused. You ain't gonna shoot me. You know what happens to women who shoot men in this territory? Better than what happens to women who don't. For a long moment they faced each other, the hunter and the prey who refused to run. Then Shaw smiled. All right, I'll go, for now. But this ain't over, Clara. Not by a long shot. He mounted his horse and rode away, dust rising behind him. Clara stood on that porch rifle in her hands until her arms ached and the sun began to set. When Samuel returned an hour later, he found her sitting on the steps, the rifle across her lap, her face pale as chalk. What happened? He demanded. Clara told him. Samuel's face went dark, darker than she'd ever seen it. He came here to my home. He wanted to scare me. Did it work? Clara looked up at him. No, but it made me realize something. What? He ain't gonna stop, not until he gets what he wants or somebody stops him. Samuel knelt down in front of her. His hands covered hers on the rifle. Then we'll stop him, he said. Together. Clara met his eyes, saw the fire there, the promise. Together, she whispered. And for the first time since her father died, she believed she wasn't alone. Samuel rode into town the next morning before the sun cleared the mountains. Clara tried to stop him. Let me come with you. No. His voice left no room for argument. You stay with the children. Keep that rifle close. Samuel. He turned in the saddle, his face hard as granite. That man came to my home, threatened my family. There ain't no law west of here that says I have to tolerate that. And what are you gonna do? Shoot him in the street. If I have to. Clara grabbed his horse's bridle. Then you'll hang, and those children will have nobody. Samuel stared down at her. The anger in his eyes flickered softened. I ain't gonna shoot him, he said quietly. Not unless he gives me cause. But I am gonna make clear what happens if he comes near you again. Words won't stop a man like Shaw. Then we'll find something that will. He reached down and touched her face, just a brush of his fingers against her cheek. Stay safe. I'll be back before dark. He rode out before she could answer. Clara watched him go, her heart pounding against her ribs. She'd known men like Samuel before. Good men, steady men, men who'd die protecting what they loved. She'd buried one already. The morning passed slow as molasses. Clara kept the children close. Ben complained about being stuck inside. Jake paced like a caged animal. And Lily sat by the window watching the road, her small face pale with worry. He's coming back, Clara told her. Your pa's coming back. Lily didn't answer, but she reached out and took Clara's hand. They stayed like that woman and child, bound by fear and hope, until the clock on the mantel struck noon. The sound of hooves made them all freeze. Clara grabbed the rifle and moved to the door. But it wasn't Shaw. It was Sheriff Thomas Reed, a lean man with gray in his beard and law in his eyes. He dismounted and walked toward the porch, hat in hand. Miss Whitmore. Sheriff. Clara didn't lower the rifle. Something wrong. Depends on how you look at it. Reed stopped at the bottom of the steps. Samuel Callahan is sitting in my jail right now. Clara's blood turned to ice. What? Got into it with Vernon Shaw about an hour ago. Shaw's claiming assault, wants to press charges. That's a lie. Maybe so, but Shaw's got witnesses. His own men, sure, but witnesses all the same. Reed shifted his weight. I'm gonna need you to come into town. Sort this out." Clara looked back at the children. Jake had moved to stand behind her, his jaw set. "I'll stay with Ben and Lily," he said. "You go." "Jake, go." His eyes met hers. "Bring Pa home." Clara handed him the rifle. "Don't open the door for anyone but me or your father. Understand?" Jake nodded. Clara turned to Reed. "Let's go." The ride into town took forever and no time at all. Clara's mind raced with every hoofbeat. Samuel in jail. Shaw pressing charges. Witnesses who'd lie for $1 and a drink. This was a trap. She knew it in her bones. When they reached the sheriff's office, Clara dismounted before Reed could help her. She pushed through the door and stopped cold. Samuel sat in the cell, his hands gripping the bars, a bruise darkening his jaw. He looked up when she entered. "Clara, you shouldn't be here." "Too late for that." She turned to Reed. "What happened?" Reed sat down behind his desk. "Callahan walked into Shaw's saloon, demanded he stay away from his property and his—" He paused. "His woman." Clara's face flushed. "And—" Shaw laughed. "Called you some names I won't repeat in front of a lady. Callahan hit him." Shaw deserved worse. "Maybe. But the law's the law." Reed leaned back. "Shaw wants $100 for damages, or he presses charges. Assault's a serious crime in this territory." $100? Clara stared at him. "That's robbery." "That's what I told him. He didn't care." Samuel spoke through the bars. "Don't pay it. I won't have you giving that snake a single cent." "It ain't your choice," Clara shot back. "You're behind bars. And I'll stay here before I let Shaw profit off this." Clara turned to Reed. "How long can you hold him?" "Without charges, a few days. With charges—" Reed shook his head. "Could be weeks before the circuit judge comes through." Weeks. Samuel gone for weeks. The ranch falling apart. The children alone. Clara thought fast. What if I talked to Shaw myself? Samuel slammed his palm against the bars. "No. Samuel. I said no. You go near that man and—" "And what?" Clara's voice rose. "He'll sell me again. Lock me up. He's already trying to do that to you." The cell went quiet. Clara stepped closer to the bars. "You came to that saloon to protect me. Now let me protect you." Samuel's eyes burned into hers. "Clara, please. Don't." "I have to." She reached through the bars and touched his hand. "Trust me." For a long moment he said nothing. Then his fingers curled around hers. "Be careful," he whispered. "I will." She turned and walked out before her courage could fail. The saloon sat at the end of Main Street like a rotting tooth. Clara stood outside, heart-hammering palms, slick with sweat. Every instinct screamed at her to run. She pushed through the doors instead. The room fell silent. Vernon Shaw sat at a corner table, a glass of whiskey in his hand, that yellow smile spreading across his face. "Well, well, the runaway returns." Clara walked straight to his table, ignoring the stares, the whispers, the men who shifted in their seats. "Drop the charges," she said. Shaw laughed. "Just like that. You don't want money. You want me to beg. So here I am, begging." Shaw's smile widened. "That's a start." He kicked out the chair across from him. "Sit." Clara sat. Shaw leaned forward close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath. "Here's the thing, darlin'. I don't want your begging. I want what I'm owed." "You got your $25. "I got cheated." Shaw's eyes hardened. "Callahan swooped in before the real bidding started. You were worth a lot more than 25, and we both know it. So this is about money. It's about respect." Shaw jabbed a finger at her. "You walked out of my saloon like you were too good for it, like you were too good for me. Now Callahan's playing hero, and the whole town's watching, and I look like a fool." Clara understood then. This wasn't about debt or dollars. This was about a small man's wounded pride. "What do you want?" she asked. Shaw leaned back. $200. That's what you would have fetched if I'd had time to find the right buyer. I don't have $200. No, but Callahan does. His ranch is worth plenty. Shaw's smile turned cruel. Or you could come back to me. Work off what you owe. I'd take that deal. Clara's hands clenched under the table. I'd die first. That can be arranged. The words hung in the air like a blade. Clara stood. You'll get nothing from me. And if you come near that ranch again, I'll put a bullet between your eyes myself. Shaw laughed. Big words from a small woman. Try me. She walked out of the saloon, head-high, legs shaking. She made it 3 steps before the tears came. Abigail Crawford found her behind the general store, crouched in the alley, sobbing into her hands. Child. Abigail knelt beside her. What happened? Clara told her. All of it. Shaw's demands, his threats, the impossible choice between her freedom and Samuel's. Abigail listened without interrupting. When Clara finished, she handed her a clean handkerchief. Dry your eyes, Abigail said. Then come with me. Where? To fix this. Abigail led her to a white house at the edge of town, the Crawford home bigger than anything Clara had seen since leaving Missouri. Inside, a man sat at a desk covered in papers. He looked up when they entered. Robert, Abigail said. This is Clara Whitmore. She needs our help. Robert Crawford had the shrewd eyes of a banker and the soft hands of a man who'd never worked a day outdoors. But he listened as Clara explained, and his expression grew darker with every word. Shaw's overreaching, Robert said finally. The original transaction was legal, even if distasteful. He has no claim on you or Callahan. Then why is Samuel in jail? Because Shaw has friends who'll lie and money to grease palms. Robert stood. But so do I. Clara stared at him. You'd help us? Why? Robert exchanged a look with his wife. Because Vernon Shaw is a cancer on this town, and because my wife believes you're worth saving. He smiled slightly. I've learned not to argue with her. Abigail touched Clara's arm. We're going to fix this, dear, but I need you to trust us. Clara didn't know these people, didn't know if their help came with strings she couldn't see, but she was out of options. What do you need me to do? Robert grabbed his hat. Nothing. Just stay here. I'll handle Shaw. An hour later, Samuel walked through the Crawfords' front door a free man. Clara ran to him without thinking. He caught her, his arms wrapping around her, pulling her close. She buried her face in his chest and let herself shake. It's all right, he murmured. I'm here. It's all right. I was so scared. I know. His hand stroked her hair. But it's over now. Clara pulled back. What happened? Samuel glanced at Robert Crawford. This man happened. Walked into Shaw's saloon with a lawyer, and the deed to every property Shaw's got liens on. Robert shrugged. Shaw's been borrowing from my bank for years. I simply reminded him what happens when those loans get called in. You threatened to ruin him, Clara said. I reminded him of reality. Robert smiled. There's a difference. Samuel extended his hand. I'm in your debt, Mr. Crawford. No debt. Robert shook his hand. Just keep that woman safe. She's got more grit than half the men in this territory. Samuel looked at Clara. I know. They rode home as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Clara sat close to Samuel on the wagon seat, closer than she needed to, close enough to feel the warmth of him. You didn't have to do that, Samuel said quietly. Face Shaw alone. Yes, I did. It was dangerous. So was you riding into town to defend my honor? Samuel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I'd do it again. Clara turned to look at him. Why? You know why. Her heart stuttered. Samuel, I know it ain't proper. His voice roughened. I know you came to my house under circumstances that weren't your choosing. And I know I got no right to feel what I feel. But Clara... He stopped the wagon and turned to face her. Every day you're under my roof, I thank God for bringing you there. Clara's eyes filled. You saved me. That's all this is. Gratitude. Is it? Samuel reached out and cupped her face in his hands. Because what I feel ain't gratitude. It's something deeper. Something that keeps me up at night and makes me forget my own name when you walk into a room. Samuel, tell me I'm wrong. His eyes searched hers. Tell me you don't feel it too, and I'll never speak of it again. Clara couldn't speak, couldn't lie. Instead, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft, at first tentative questioning. Then Samuel's hands slid into her hair, and Clara's arms wrapped around his neck, and the world fell away. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. That answer your question, Clara whispered. Samuel laughed, a real laugh rusty from disuse. I reckon it does. They sat there as darkness fell, foreheads touching, hearts beating in tandem. For the first time in her life, Clara understood what it meant to be home. The children were waiting on the porch when the wagon pulled up. Ben ran out first, nearly tripping over his own feet. Pa, you're back! Samuel caught him in a hug. Course I'm back. You think a little thing like jail could keep me? Jake stood back, arms crossed, but his eyes were suspiciously bright. You all right? I'm fine, son, thanks to Clara. Jake looked at her. Something had shifted in his face, the last of his walls crumbling. You got him out. With help. Jake nodded slowly. Then he did something Clara never expected. He stepped forward and hugged her. Clara froze for a moment, then wrapped her arms around him. The boy was stiff, awkward, unused to affection. But he held on. Thank you, he whispered. Clara's eyes burned. You're welcome. Lily appeared in the doorway, her rag doll clutched tight. She looked at Samuel, then at Clara, then at the two of them standing together. A tiny smile crossed her face. Pa? She said, and Clara's heart nearly stopped. Clara's staying forever. Samuel looked at Clara. Clara looked at Samuel. If she wants to, Samuel said quietly. Clara knelt down to Lily's level. Would you like that if I stayed? Lily nodded, her eyes huge and hopeful. Then I'm not going anywhere. Clara pulled the child into her arms. I promise. That night, after the children were in bed, Clara sat on the porch with Samuel. The stars blazed overhead, thick as spilled flour. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called. Shaw won't give up, Clara said. Men like him never do. I know. He'll find another way to come at us. Samuel reached over and took her hand. Let him try. You sound awfully confident for a man who was in jail this morning. I wasn't confident this morning. Samuel's thumb traced circles on her palm. But I am now. Why? He turned to look at her. Because this morning I was fighting alone. Now I've got you. Clara smiled. Careful, that almost sounded romantic. Maybe I'm learning. They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching the stars wheel overhead. Clara didn't know what tomorrow would bring, didn't know if Shaw would strike again, or if the town would turn against them, or if this fragile happiness could last. But right now, in this moment, she had everything she'd ever wanted. A home, a family, a man who looked at her like she was worth more than gold. And for Clara Whitmore, the girl who'd been sold for $25, that was more than enough. 2 weeks passed without a word from Vernon Shaw. Clara wanted to believe it was over, wanted to believe Robert Crawford's threats had worked. But every night she checked the locks twice. Every morning she scanned the horizon for riders. Samuel noticed. You're wearing a hole in that floor, he said one evening, watching her pace the kitchen. Can't help it. Shaw ain't coming. Clara stopped pacing. You don't know that. I know Crawford put the fear of God in him. I know Shaw's got more to lose than gain by coming after us. Samuel stood and crossed to her. I know you're safe here. Am I? He took her hands. As long as I'm breathing. Clara wanted to believe him. But she'd learned young that safety was an illusion. The people you loved could be taken in an instant. The ground beneath your feet could crumble without warning. She'd lost her father, her home, her freedom. She couldn't lose this too. Samuel, she said quietly, what are we? He frowned. What do you mean? I mean. She pulled her hands back. I live in your house. I take care of your children. We've kissed. But I don't know what I am to you. Am I a housekeeper? A governess? Something else. Samuel's jaw tightened. You know what you are. Do I? For a long moment he didn't answer. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. A ring, simple gold, worn smooth by years. This was Sarah's, he said. I took it off her finger the day she died and swore I'd never give it to another woman. Clara's breath caught. But that was before you. Samuel held out the ring. Clara Whitmore, I ain't good with words, never have been, but I know what I feel, and I know I don't want to spend another day wondering what we are. Clara stared at the ring. Samuel, marry me. The words hung in the air between them. Clara's eyes filled with tears. You can't mean that. I've never meant anything more. But I was sold. Like property. Like livestock. The whole town knows. I don't care what the town knows. Samuel stepped closer. I care what you say, right now, to me. Clara looked at this man, this steady, stubborn, wounded man who'd paid $25 to save a stranger and ended up saving himself. Yes, she whispered. Samuel's face transformed. The hard lines softened. The weight lifted. He slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, and pulled her into his arms. I'll make you happy, he said against her hair. I swear it. Clara held on tight. You already have. The news spread through the ranch like wildfire. Ben whooped so loud the horses spooked. Jake tried to act indifferent, but Clara caught him smiling when he thought no one was looking. And Lily. Lily walked up to Clara, took her hand, and said the longest sentence she'd spoken in 3 years. You're going to be my new mama. Clara knelt down. If you want me to be. Lily threw her arms around Clara's neck. I want. Clara held the child close, tears streaming down her face. She'd never had children of her own. Never thought she would. But these three, Jake with his guarded heart, Ben with his boundless energy, Lily with her hard-won words, they were hers now. All hers. The wedding was set for Sunday, 2 weeks out. Clara spent the days preparing sewing a simple dress from blue calico baking pies for the reception, cleaning the house until it gleamed. The children helped where they could, even Jake, who grumbled but never refused. On Thursday, Abigail Crawford rode out to the ranch with news. Shaw's been talking, she said, accepting a cup of coffee at the kitchen table. Clara's stomach dropped. About what? About you. About the wedding. Abigail set down her cup. He's telling everyone in town that you're still his property, that the original sale wasn't valid because your stepfather didn't have legal guardianship. That's a lie. Is it? Clara froze. My mother signed the papers. She had. Did she sign them before or after your stepfather died? The blood drained from Clara's face. After. A week after. Then Shaw might have a case. Abigail's voice was gentle but firm. In Montana territory, a widow's signature on a sale document isn't valid without a male witness. If your stepfather was dead when your mother signed you over, She wasn't my guardian, Clara whispered. Not legally. Which means Shaw never legally owned you. But that's good, isn't it? It means the original transaction was void. Abigail reached across the table and took Clara's hand. But it also means Shaw could claim he's owed compensation. Real compensation. Not $25, but whatever you're worth as a free woman who was illegally detained. Clara's mind raced. How much? He's claiming $500. Clara laughed a harsh, broken sound. We don't have $500. I know. Then what do we do? Abigail squeezed her hand. Fight. Samuel took the news like a man taking a bullet, silent, absorbing the impact, letting the pain settle before he spoke. He can't do this. He's already doing it. Clara paced the bedroom, her wedding dress hanging unfinished on the hook. He's got a lawyer. He's filing papers. Robert says we have a week before it goes to the judge. Then we'll fight it. With what? We don't have money for lawyers. We don't have... Samuel grabbed her arms, stopping her mid-pace. We have the truth. The truth doesn't matter to men like Shaw. It matters to me. His eyes burned into hers. And it'll matter to whatever judge hears this case. You were illegally detained. Shaw committed a crime, not us. Then why does it feel like we're the ones being punished? Samuel pulled her close. Because that's how men like Shaw operate. They twist things, make victims feel like criminals. He tilted her chin up. But we ain't gonna let him win. Not now. Not ever. Clara wanted to believe him, but the fear was back, crawling through her veins like poison. She'd been so close to happiness, so close to a real life, and now it was all slipping away. Friday morning, Sheriff Reed rode out to the ranch. Clara saw him coming and felt her heart seize. Samuel! Samuel stepped onto the porch, his face hard. Sheriff! Reed dismounted slowly, his expression troubled. Callahan, Miss Whitmore. What is it? Samuel asked. Got a summons here. Reed held out a folded paper. Judge Morrison's calling a hearing. Monday morning, 9 o'clock. Shaw versus Whitmore. Clara's legs went weak. That's 2 days before the wedding. I know. Reed's voice softened. I'm sorry, ma'am. I truly am. Samuel took the summons and read it, his jaw tightening with every line. This is horseshit. Maybe so, but it's legal horseshit, and that means you gotta show up. Reed looked at Clara. Both of you. And if we don't, then Shaw wins by default, and he'll have the law on his side when he comes to collect. Collect. The word hit Clara like a fist. She wasn't a person to Vernon Shaw. She was property, merchandise, something to be collected. We'll be there, Samuel said through gritted teeth. Reed nodded and mounted his horse. For what it's worth, I hope you win. Shaw's been a blight on this territory for too long. He rode off, leaving Clara and Samuel standing on the porch, the summons crumpling in Samuel's fist. What are we going to do? Clara whispered. Samuel didn't answer right away. He stared at the horizon, his mind working. Then he said, We're gonna fight, and we're gonna win. How can you be so sure? Samuel turned to her. Because I ain't losing you. Not to Shaw. Not to any man. He took her face in his hands. You're mine, Clara, and I protect what's mine. He kissed her hard, fierce, full of promise. And for a moment Clara believed. Saturday passed in a blur of preparation. Robert Crawford arrived with his lawyer, a sharp-eyed man from Helena, named Frederick Marsh, who spoke in clipped sentences, and carried a leather case full of documents. The good news, Marsh said, spreading papers across the kitchen table, is that Shaw's claim has holes. The original transaction was invalid, yes, but that actually works in your favor. You were never his property to begin with. Then why are we in court? Clara asked. Because Shaw's arguing lost revenue. He claims he would have earned $500 from your employment at his saloon. He wants compensation. Clara's stomach turned. Employment. Such a clean word for what Shaw had planned. Can he win? Samuel demanded. Possibly. Marsh straightened his spectacles. It depends on the judge. Morrison's fair, but he's also old-fashioned. He might see this as a simple breach of contract rather than what it was. Clara's voice was cold. Kidnapping. False imprisonment. Attempted. She couldn't finish. Samuel's hand found hers under the table. The key, Marsh continued, is establishing what Shaw's true intentions were. If we can prove he planned to use you for... He cleared his throat. Immoral purposes, his entire case collapses. I was there 3 days, Clara said. I know exactly what he planned. Can you testify to that? Yes. Marsh nodded. Then we have a chance. A chance isn't good enough, Samuel said. It's all I can offer. Marsh began gathering his papers. Get some rest tonight. Tomorrow's going to be long. After Marsh left, Clara sat alone on the porch watching the sun sink behind the mountains. Jake found her there an hour later. You scared? He asked, leaning against the railing. Terrified. Jake nodded like he understood. Pa's scared too, I can tell. He doesn't show it. He never does. But I know him. Jake was quiet for a moment. After Ma died, he didn't talk for 2 weeks, just worked, sun up to sundown. Like if he stopped moving, he'd fall apart. Clara looked at him. What changed? We needed him. Me and Ben and Lily. We couldn't lose both parents. Jake's voice roughened. So he came back. For us. He's a good man. The best. Jake turned to face her. And you're good for him. I didn't want to see it at first. But you are. Clara's eyes stung. Thank you, Jake. Don't thank me yet. His jaw set. We still got to get through tomorrow. Clara nodded. We will. You promise? She reached out and squeezed his hand. I promise. Sunday morning came gray and quiet. Clara dressed in her best clothes, not the wedding dress not yet, and pinned her hair back with trembling hands. In the mirror, she saw a woman she barely recognized. A woman who'd survived. Samuel waited at the wagon, the children clustered around him. Ben looked scared. Lily clutched her rag doll. Jake stood tall, trying to be brave. You ready? Samuel asked. Clara climbed up beside him. No, but let's go anyway. The ride to town felt like a funeral procession. Clara kept her eyes forward, her hands folded in her lap, her heart hammering so loud she could barely think. Samuel's arm pressed against hers, warm, steady grounding. Whatever happened today, she wasn't alone. That had to count for something. The courtroom was packed. Every seat was taken, every wall lined with spectators. Clara saw Abigail Crawford near the front, Robert beside her. Sheriff Reed stood by the door. And at the plaintiff's table, Vernon Shaw sat with his lawyer, that yellow smile splitting his face. Clara wanted to be sick. Don't look at him, Samuel murmured. Look at me. She turned, found his eyes, held on. Whatever happens, he said, I love you. Clara's breath caught. He'd never said those words before, not out loud. I love you too, she whispered. The judge entered, a silver-haired man with a stern face and tired eyes. The room fell silent. This court is now in session, Judge Morrison announced. Shaw versus Whitmore. Mr. Shaw, you may proceed. Shaw's lawyer stood, a slick man in a tailored suit who spoke with practiced ease. Your Honor, my client seeks compensation for financial losses resulting from the illegal removal of his property. She ain't property, Jake shouted from the gallery. The judge's gavel cracked. Order, young man, one more outburst and you'll be removed. Jake sat back, face red with fury. Shaw's lawyer continued detailing the contract between Shaw and Clara's stepfather, the significant investment. Shaw had made the considerable losses he'd suffered. Clara listened, her nails digging into her palms, bile rising in her throat. When it was Marsh's turn, he stood and spoke calmly, precisely laying out the facts: the invalid contract, the illegal detention, the immoral intentions. Miss Whitmore was held against her will for 3 days, Marsh said. She was denied food, water, and basic human dignity. Mr. Shaw's own employees can testify to the nature of his establishment and the fate that awaited her. Shaw's lawyer objected. The judge overruled. Miss Whitmore, Marsh said, would you take the stand? Clara stood on legs that felt like water. The walk to the witness chair was the longest of her life. She sat down, smoothed her skirt, and looked at the judge. State your name for the record. Clara Josephine Whitmore. Miss Whitmore, can you describe the circumstances of your arrival at Mr. Shaw's establishment? Clara took a breath, and she told the truth. All of it. The locked room, the hunger, the fear, Shaw's visits, his threats, his descriptions of what awaited her if she didn't cooperate. By the time she finished, the courtroom was silent. Several women were crying. Even Judge Morrison's stern face had softened. No further questions, Marsh said quietly. Shaw's lawyer approached. Miss Whitmore, isn't it true that you willingly went with Mr. Callahan when he offered to pay your debt? I went because the alternative was worse. But you did go willingly. I went because I had no choice. That's not what I asked. Clara's voice rose. I was locked in a room. I was starving. A man I'd never met paid money to a monster who planned to sell me to strangers for... Her voice broke. The courtroom erupted. The judge pounded his gavel. Shaw's lawyer stepped back, and Samuel stood in the gallery, his face white with rage, his hands shaking. Order, Judge Morrison shouted. I will have order. Slowly the room quieted. The judge turned to Clara. Miss Whitmore, you may step down. Clara returned to her seat trembling. Samuel took her hand and didn't let go. Judge Morrison looked at the papers before him. At Shaw. At Clara. At the packed courtroom of people who'd come to watch a woman fight for her freedom. Then he spoke. I've heard enough. His voice carried through the room. The original contract was invalid. Miss Whitmore was never Mr. Shaw's property. The so-called debt was a fiction created to exploit a vulnerable young woman. Shaw shot to his feet. Your Honor. Sit down, Mr. Shaw. Morrison's eyes were cold. I'm not finished. Shaw sat. Mr. Shaw, your establishment has been the subject of complaints for years. I've tolerated it because no one had the courage to speak up. Until today. Morrison stood. Case dismissed. And Mr. Shaw. The room held its breath. If I hear one more word about you harassing Miss Whitmore or the Callahan family, I'll personally ensure you never do business in this territory again. Am I clear? Shaw's face twisted with fury. Crystal. Good. Court adjourned. The gavel fell, and Clara Whitmore collapsed into Samuel's arms, sobbing with relief. Outside the courtroom, the crowd parted to let them through. Abigail Crawford hugged Clara tight. Robert shook Samuel's hand. Sheriff Reed tipped his hat. And at the edge of the crowd, Vernon Shaw stood watching. His eyes met Clara's. She didn't look away. This ain't over, Shaw called. You hear me, Callahan? This ain't over. Samuel turned his face hard as stone. Yeah, it is. He helped Clara into the wagon, climbed up beside her, and drove away without looking back. Clara watched the town shrink behind them, the courthouse, the saloon, the life she'd almost lost. Then she turned to Samuel and smiled. Take me home. He smiled back. Yes, ma'am. The wedding was supposed to happen on Tuesday, but Clara woke Monday morning with a feeling she couldn't shake, something cold sitting in her chest like a stone. What's wrong? Samuel asked, finding her on the porch before sunrise. I don't know. Clara wrapped her arms around herself. Something doesn't feel right. Shaw's done. The judge made that clear. Men like Shaw don't care what judges say. Samuel pulled her close. Then we'll deal with whatever comes, together. Clara wanted to believe him, but the cold feeling wouldn't leave. By noon, she understood why. Jake came running from the north pasture, his face white as chalk, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "Pa! The barn! Someone set fire to the hay stores!" Samuel was moving before Jake finished speaking. Clara grabbed the water buckets and followed, her heart pounding. The barn wasn't fully ablaze, not yet, but smoke poured from the back and flames licked at the dry timber walls. Samuel and Jake worked the pump while Clara and Ben threw water on the flames. Even Lily helped, her small hands passing empty buckets to be refilled. It took an hour to put out the fire. When it was done, they stood in the blackened ruins of the hay stores, exhausted, covered in soot. "This wasn't an accident," Samuel said, his voice hard as iron. "No," Clara agreed. "It wasn't." Jake kicked at a charred beam. "Shaw. We don't know that." "Who else would it be?" Jake turned on his father. "He said it wasn't over. This is him. He's trying to destroy us." Samuel grabbed Jake's shoulders. "Listen to me. We don't have proof, and without proof we can't do anything. So we just let him burn our ranch." "No." Samuel's eyes burned with fury Clara had never seen before. "We rebuild. We watch. And if he comes again, we'll be ready." Clara looked at the ruined barn, at her family covered in ash, at the smoke still rising into the summer sky. Shaw wasn't done with them, and she was done running. That night, after the children were in bed, Clara found Samuel cleaning his rifle at the kitchen table. "You're planning something," she said. "I'm preparing." "For what?" Samuel looked up. "For whatever Shaw tries next." Clara sat down across from him. "I've been thinking. About how to end this. Really end it." Samuel set down the rifle. "I'm listening." "Shaw's whole power comes from money and fear. He's got the money because he's got the saloon. And he's got the fear because people are too scared to stand against him." "That's all true." "So what happens if we take away both?" Samuel leaned forward. "How?" Clara's eyes met his. "Abigail Crawford told me something once. She said Shaw's been borrowing from the bank for years. Robert holds the liens on everything Shaw owns. Crawford already threatened him with that." "Threatened, yes, but he didn't follow through." Clara's voice hardened. "What if he did? What if Robert called in every loan, foreclosed on every property? Shaw would have nothing. You think Crawford would do that?" "I think Crawford's been looking for an excuse to destroy Shaw for years. We just need to give him one." Samuel studied her face, this woman he loved. This survivor, this fighter. "You've changed," he said quietly. "I had to." "No." He reached across the table and took her hand. "You didn't have to. You chose to. That's different." Clara's eyes stung. "I'm tired of being afraid." "I know. I'm tired of waiting for the next attack, the next threat, the next fire." "I know. I want to fight back." Samuel lifted her hand to his lips. "Then we fight back." The next morning, Clara rode into town alone. Samuel wanted to come, but she needed to do this herself. Needed to prove to herself more than anyone that she wasn't the scared girl who'd been sold for $25. Abigail Crawford met her at the door of the White House on the hill. "Clara, I heard about the fire." "Everyone's heard by now, I reckon." "What can I do?" Clara stepped inside. "I need to talk to your husband." Robert Crawford sat in his study papers, spread before him, spectacles perched on his nose. He looked up when Clara entered. "Mrs. Callahan. Or should I say, Miss Whitmore, not yet. Mrs. Callahan." "Soon enough." Clara sat down without being invited. "I have a proposal." "I'm listening." "Shaw set fire to our barn." "You can prove this." "No, but we both know it was him." Robert nodded slowly. I suspect you're right. You hold his loans. Every mortgage, every lien, every debt Shaw owes, it's in your ledger. It is. Clara leaned forward. Call them in. Robert's eyebrows rose. All of them. Every last one. Foreclose on his saloon. Take his properties. Leave him with nothing. That's a significant action, Miss Whitmore. It would destroy him. Yes. And you want that? Clara's voice didn't waver. He tried to sell me. He threatened my family. He burned our barn. Yes, Mr. Crawford, I want him destroyed. Robert removed his spectacles, cleaned them slowly, put them back on. Shaw has been a cancer on this town for 20 years, he said finally. He's corrupted officials, exploited women, and intimidated anyone who tried to stop him. Then stop him. It's not that simple. Shaw has friends, connections. So do you. Robert looked at her, really looked at her for a long moment. You're not the same woman who walked out of that saloon 2 months ago. No, I'm not. What changed you? Clara thought of Samuel, of Jake and Ben and Lily, of the family she'd built from nothing. I found something worth fighting for. Robert smiled a slow, dangerous smile. So have I. He stood and extended his hand. You have a deal, Miss Whitmore. By the end of the week, Vernon Shaw won't own so much as the clothes on his back. Clara shook his hand. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Robert's smile faded. Shaw won't go quietly. When he realizes what's happening, he'll come after whoever's responsible. I know. Are you prepared for that? Clara thought of Samuel cleaning his rifle at the kitchen table, of Jake standing tall against the man who'd threatened his family, of her own heart hardened by survival, softened by love. Yes, she said. I'm prepared. The foreclosure notices went out on Wednesday. By Thursday, the whole town was buzzing with the news. Vernon Shaw's saloon, his boarding house, his stables, all seized by the bank. Every asset frozen. Every account emptied. Shaw himself stood on the boardwalk outside his saloon, watching Robert Crawford's men board up the windows. Clara heard later what happened. Shaw had screamed, cursed, threatened everyone within earshot. He'd tried to push past the deputies, tried to break down the doors of his own establishment. Sheriff Reed had arrested him for disturbing the peace. And then in the jail cell, Shaw had made a mistake. He'd confessed. Not to a deputy, not to the sheriff, but to another prisoner, a drifter named Jenkins, who'd been picked up for public drunkenness and who happened to have very good ears. He said he'd burn the whole territory before he let some jumped-up ranchwoman take what was his. Jenkins told Sheriff Reed. Said he wished he'd finished the job at the Callahan place. Reed had the confession written down, witnessed, and signed before Shaw even knew what was happening. Clara learned all this Friday morning when Sheriff Reed rode out to the ranch with the news. Shaw's been charged with arson, Reed said, plus conspiracy, harassment, and about a dozen other things the prosecutor's still adding up. He's looking at 20 years minimum. Clara's knees went weak. Samuel caught her before she could fall. It's over, she whispered. It's over. Reed tipped his hat. Ma'am, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I've seen a lot of people try to take down Vernon Shaw. None of them succeeded. He looked at her with something like wonder. You did. Clara shook her head. I didn't do anything. You stood up. You fought back. You showed this town what courage looks like. Reed mounted his horse. That's more than most people manage in a lifetime. He rode away, leaving Clara and Samuel standing in the yard. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Samuel pulled her into his arms and held her like he'd never let go. It's over, he said. Clara buried her face in his chest. It's over. And for the first time since her father died, she believed it. The wedding happened on Saturday. Not the fancy ceremony Clara might once have dreamed of, just a simple service in the small church on the hill with Reverend Matthews presiding, and the whole town crowded into the pews. Clara wore the blue calico dress she'd sewn herself. Samuel wore his best shirt pressed and clean. The children stood at the front. Jake solemn Ben, grinning Lily, clutching her rag doll and smiling wider than anyone had ever seen. When Reverend Matthews asked if anyone objected, the church went dead silent. No one spoke. Clara felt tears streaming down her face as Samuel slipped the ring onto her finger. Sarah's ring passed down with blessing instead of burden. I, Samuel Wade Callahan, take thee, Clara Josephine Whitmore, to be my lawful wedded wife. His voice cracked on the words. Clara squeezed his hands. I, Clara Josephine Whitmore, take thee Samuel Wade Callahan to be my lawful wedded husband. Her voice was steady, strong, the voice of a woman who'd walked through fire and come out gold. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do us part. Reverend Matthews smiled. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Montana, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Samuel, you may kiss your bride. Samuel cupped Clara's face in his work-roughened hands and kissed her soft and sweet and full of promise. The church erupted in cheers. Ben whooped, Jake clapped. Lily tugged at Clara's dress until Clara knelt down and hugged her tight. "Mama," Lily whispered. Clara's heart stopped. It was the first time Lily had called her that. "Yes, sweetheart." Lily pressed her small hand against Clara's cheek. "I love you." Clara couldn't speak, could only hold this child her child now, and let the tears fall. Samuel knelt beside them, his arms wrapping around both. Jake and Ben joined, crowding close, and for one perfect moment, the Callahan family stood together, whole, healed, complete. Abigail Crawford dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Robert cleared his throat and looked away. Even Sheriff Reed, standing at the back of the church, had suspiciously bright eyes. This was what victory looked like. Not the defeat of an enemy, though that mattered too, but the building of a family, the finding of home. The reception lasted until sundown. Neighbors brought food pies and casseroles and fresh bread. Someone produced a fiddle. Dancing broke out in the churchyard, and even Jake was convinced to spin Lily around while Ben tried to teach himself to jig. Clara watched from the edge of the crowd, her heart so full it hurt. Samuel appeared beside her, 2 cups of punch in his hands. "What are you thinking about?" "Everything." Clara took the cup but didn't drink. 3 months ago I was locked in a storage room praying for death. And now? Now I'm married. I've got 3 children, a home, a husband who loves me. Husband. Samuel smiled. I like the sound of that. So do I. He set down his cup and pulled her close. Dance with me. I don't know how. Neither do I. We'll figure it out together. They moved to the edge of the dancing, swaying more than stepping, holding each other like the world might end if they let go. Clara Callahan. Samuel murmured against her hair. Mrs. Clara Callahan. That's me. I never thought I'd marry again. After Sarah. I thought that part of my life was over. So did I. The marriage part, I mean. I never thought anyone would want me. Not after everything. Samuel pulled back to look at her. I want you. All of you. The strength and the scars and everything in between. Clara's eyes filled. How did I get so lucky? Lucky. Samuel laughed softly. Woman, you survived hell. You fought your way out of bondage. You stood up to a man twice your size and didn't blink. That ain't luck. That's courage. I was scared every second. That's what courage is. Being scared and doing it anyway. Clara reached up and touched his face, this man who'd saved her, who'd chosen her, who'd loved her when she couldn't love herself. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For seeing me. The real me. Not the girl Shaw tried to sell or the woman the town gossiped about. Just me. Samuel kissed her forehead. That's the only you I've ever seen." They danced until the stars came out and the fiddle fell silent and the last of the guests drifted home. 5 years later, the Callahan Ranch was the most prosperous in 3 counties. The barn that Shaw had burned was rebuilt bigger, stronger, better. New fences stretched across expanded pastures. Cattle grazed where wildflowers once grew, and horses bred for quality sold to ranchers as far away as California. Clara stood on the porch watching her family. Jake, 19 now, was breaking a new stallion in the corral, patient, confident every inch his father's son. He'd grown into a man who spoke little and worked hard, who protected his siblings with fierce devotion, who'd forgiven Clara long ago for being the woman who wasn't his mother. Ben, 15, sat under the cottonwood tree with a book. Always a book, dreaming of college, of law school, of a world beyond the ranch. Clara had taught him to read poetry, and he'd taught himself everything else. Lily, 12, was helping her little sister plant flowers by the fence. Sarah Rose, named for the 2 women who'd given Clara her family, had been born 3 years ago, a squalling, red-faced miracle who'd completed something Clara hadn't known was incomplete. And Samuel walked across the yard toward her, a smile playing at his lips, his dark hair now fully streaked with gray. "What are you looking at?" "Everything." Clara smiled. "I'm looking at everything." He climbed the steps and stood beside her, his arm wrapping around her shoulders. "Happy. More than I ever thought possible." Regrets. Clara thought about it, really thought. She thought about her father who died too young, but had taught her to love words. She thought about her mother whose weakness had been her undoing, and whose signature had sent Clara into darkness. She thought about Vernon Shaw rotting in prison, stripped of everything he'd built on other people's suffering. And she thought about herself, the 19-year-old girl who'd been sold for $25, and the woman she'd become. "No regrets," she said. "Not one." Samuel pulled her closer. "I was thinking about that day. In the saloon." "What about it?" "I walked in for whiskey. I had no intention of buying anything else." "So what changed?" Samuel was quiet for a moment. "You looked at me." "I looked at a lot of people." "Not like that. Not like you were daring me to see you as human." He shook his head. "I couldn't walk out of there and leave you to whatever Shaw had planned. I would have hated myself forever." Clara turned to face him. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had walked out, I mean?" "Sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep." His eyes darkened. "It terrifies me." "Me too. But then I wake up and you're beside me and the children are safe, and I remember that we got out. We made it." "We did." Samuel kissed her slow, tender, full of 5 years of love and struggle and triumph. "Clara Callahan," he said against her lips. "Samuel Callahan. I love you." "I love you too." From the yard, Sarah Rose's voice rang out. "Mama, Papa, come see the flowers." Clara laughed and took Samuel's hand. "Coming, sweetheart." They walked down the steps together, husband and wife partners in everything, bound by choice rather than circumstance. The little girl met them halfway, her face bright with joy, her hands full of wildflowers. "Look, Lily and I planted them. They're for you, Mama." Clara knelt down and accepted the flowers, slightly crushed, mostly weeds, absolutely perfect. "They're beautiful, baby." "Like you," Clara smiled. "Like our whole family." Samuel lifted Sarah Rose onto his shoulders. Ben closed his book and wandered over. Jake finished with the stallion and joined them. Lily ran up, breathless and laughing. They stood together, all 6 of them, in the yard of the ranch they'd built from nothing. Behind them, the house glowed warm in the afternoon light. Above them, the sky stretched endless and blue. And before them, the future waited, full of promise. Clara looked at her family, her husband, her children, her home. She thought of the frightened girl in Shaw's storage room, praying for rescue. She thought of the woman who'd stood in a courtroom and told the truth. She thought of every moment that had led to this, every loss, every fear, every small act of courage. And she understood finally what her father had tried to teach her all those years ago when he'd read poetry by candlelight and told her she was worth more than she knew. Worth isn't measured in dollars. It isn't given by others or taken away by circumstance. Worth is what you build with your hands, with your heart, with every choice to keep going when the world tells you to stop. Clara Josephine Whitmore had been sold for $25. But Clara Josephine Callahan, she was priceless, and she knew it.